Welcome in, everybody. We are back after a week hiatus. This is the Daily Destroyer, the DFS podcast or the DFS show, I should say, on the Dynasty Warzone Network. As always, I'm your co-host, Tyler at FF Tyler O, with my man Lou at Lou Dog Sherman, ready to break down the Week 13 slate. Hope everybody had a good holiday break, had some great food over Thanksgiving and whatnot. We're going to jump right into it, folks. There's not really a recap because we didn't have a show. Quarterback, Week 13. You're looking at the slate. Lou, I'll start off just a little bit differently here. So, what is one quarterback that you think, folks might be a little bit on that you are fading?
Yeah, I think this week there's a good amount of quarterbacks that I think are pretty viable. Unfortunately, a lot of them are in similar games, and for me, I think a lot of people, and we might be a little different in this, so I'd like to hear your opinion on it. I don't know if I'm going to really be playing Taylor Heinicke this week.
Okay.
It is a game that I kind of like in general. I think it could be high scoring against the Raiders, but I think it's going to be a game that a lot of people talk up and want to be playing. And in that case, I think I'd prefer Carr over Heinicke this week. And I think Heinicke's probably the guy that I end up not playing.
And you mean Derek Carr leading the NFL in passing yards, correct?
Yeah, imagine setting the over-under on Derek Carr passing yards at 4,000 yards in
for what, like the third year in a row.
Season.
Yeah, for folks that are aware, like Lou and I have been betting.
I don't know if he's had under 4,000.
Every year we bet the over on Derek Carr's yards, and every year we're cashing money. It's just easy money every year. For some reason, the books just hate Derek Carr. I'm with you on Derek Carr. I think Heinicke is going to be a pretty popular play, but I would go Carr, especially in that matchup. One of the guys that I'm looking at least in cash that I'm decently excited about is Tua, 5,500. He's playing the Giants. I mean, first of all, the Giants just aren't that good. So there is that. And Tua has been pretty solid. Like, has he been necessarily lighting the world on fire? Absolutely not. But when you're talking about at least a cash lineup at 5,500, the Giants' defense has been pretty bad, and Tua has been pretty safe and pretty solid. So at 5,500, I really like his odds of getting at least 20 DK points, and for that price, it is a guy that I am. I'm not saying I'm locking in. I think there's not a single quarterback that I'm like lock it in, move along, but he's one of those quarterbacks where I definitely feel pretty confident at 5,500 getting him in there.
Yeah, I think he's a good way to play off of Heinicke if other people are, it's zigging versus zagging. And I think that's probably the way I would go as well in that price range. I don't think I would be doing much. I mean, we have Mike Glennon this week at 4K. What do you think about dropping another 1,500 to get to him?
No, the floor is too low, man. See, that's the thing is I get it. Like, what does he need? Like 12 points to be worth it for us. That's like nothing. I guess if somebody wanted to do it, I wouldn't hate it, but I just can't bring myself. Like, the Giants' offense is terrible with Daniel Jones, and then you bring in the neck of Mike Glennon in here. Like, I don't know, man. It's not something I can do confidently. I won't be playing Mike Glennon. If other people do, sure. I hope he succeeds in this spot. The price is great, but I've built some lineups, and I just don't I don't find myself needing to save that 1,500 or even 2,000. I'd rather go with Carr or Tua or a different quarterback just with a different build. So he's not a guy that I'm thinking of. And then I think another popular stack this week is just, it's got to be the Buccaneers against the Falcons. I mean, you look at the Falcons, man. I mean, the team is bad. The defense is bad. And I think what really sticks out to me is the Falcons defense is bottom 3 in sack rate. Bottom 3 in QB hits. Like, they don't create any pressure. And I don't need to bring up any stats about Brady in a clean pocket here. I mean, Brady's going to absolutely destroy people when he's in a clean pocket. And the narrative of last week where he gave up, Fournette had all the touchdowns and Brady didn't get to eat, and he's going to want to come back and throw some tutties in this game. So I think it's 7,200 is a very reasonable price for Tom Brady in a game where he could easily throw for 300 yards or 3 or 4 touchdowns. We'll get to some of the pieces later because I think a lot of his pieces are well priced as well. So it's an easy game to stack. But Brady at 72, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's been kind of the code this year is double stack Tom Brady and you're going to win money. You're at least going to cash. And he keeps doing it. He's old man, but playing like he's 5 years ago, basically. And he doesn't have to do anything super fancy. Like they're able to run the ball as well. And he's 7,200, which the price came down from last week after he only threw for 1 touchdown. But we've seen the upside. He's at 3 games, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 games this year with at least 4 touchdowns. So the upside is there, and he has great weapons, and it's just an amazing matchup against a team. The one concern I have with that is the Falcons just seem to give up very early in some of these games. And if this game's 21-3 at the half, I could see the upside on Brady be a little lower. But at the end of the day, like if they're up 21-3, he probably threw for at least 2 of the touchdowns. So
I literally had this.
that's where I don't think it's like the worst thing because a lot of
Yep.
touchdowns are going through Brady right now, except for last week. But I think Tom Brady's in an amazing spot.
Yeah, I mean, I literally just talked about this on a podcast yesterday where I was like, I'm more concerned with Brady or Fournette getting replaced in the late 3rd or 4th than I am with these guys all coming through with some great value. I mean, is there a chance we see Gabbert and Rojo like the whole 4th quarter? Absolutely. But as you mentioned, how does that happen? That's because they're already up 3 or 4 touchdowns, and Brady will likely be responsible, and Fournette to a point will probably be responsible for that as well. We like Carr, we like Brady, Tua. You mentioned Glennon. Is there any other quarterbacks on here that you're eyeing to get into your pool or possibly play in those cash lineups?
I think I do have others sort of in my pool. I think Jalen Hurts and Justin Herbert probably the 2 other ones outside of Carr. I think in cash, I am looking at Carr a decent amount. It's just such a great matchup and a game that I expect there to be points in, and he's been getting 300 yards, the bonus, like way more often than we've seen in the past. And he's been running the ball a little bit here and there in games. So like I just think his floor for 6K is very solid.
Pool of 3 quarterbacks, Lou.
I'm gonna do Carr, Brady, and Herbert.
Carr, Brady, and Herbert. Let's shift over to the running back position. We could probably do an entire show on the running back position. So you and I are going to have to work on being a little concise here because I feel like there's just so many damn good plays and there's so many ways of looking at this. And I think there's some smart contrarian plays for those tournaments as well. We'll try to stick to the cash plays though, as always. But I think, at the top, we got to talk about the glaring value here. And there's plenty of them. Is Antonio Gibson, 5,700, no McKissick. They're playing the Raiders defense, terrible run defense, and any run metric you can come up with, they're in the bottom 3rd of. And Gibson, he was battling that stress fracture in the shin, and things have been better since the bye. I mean, I can't speak to if it's healed or not, but I mean, it looks as though they're ready to ride this dude, and he's looking better, at least from the good old eye test. So, Antonio Gibson, 5,700. While the ownership is going to be high, I find him as a guy, that I'm not ready to say I'm locking him into my lineups, but he's definitely at the top of the pool.
Yeah, I think he's the one that I'm most excited to play, and part of the reason why I'm excited to play him is because there's other options around there. I think it'll spread the ownership out a little bit. I think he still is likely to be, if he's not the top owned running back, then I still think he's likely to be in the top 3 because there's going to be other people that think that same way, where you're looking at Gibson, Eli Mitchell, David Montgomery, James Conner, Gaskin, like those guys in that range. Without McKissick, that's where I think Gibson takes a step above them.
Okay. Agreed.
We saw with Eli Mitchell last week, so he could get talked up as looking at last week and, is he like fully back to healthy now? He's got a decent matchup as well. The Seahawks are not that great against the run, similar to the Raiders. I think they also they being the 49ers are more likely to be leading in that game, and he's running the ball more often. But in this matchup with Gibson, without McKissick there, he's more likely to catch passes. So I don't think he's as game flow dependent as maybe in other games. So I like Gibson. I'd probably do Gibson, then Mitchell, and then Jamal Williams at 5,400 is good too. But I like the other two more than Jamal. What's your take on
Yep.
Jamal? Because I know when he was on the Packers, he was basically a pass catching back, and now without Swift, he'll do both roles. It's weird because most of this year he's been more of a goal line back. So,
Yeah,
do you
one or
think he
two
goes
pounder.
into the full 3 down kind of guy?
To an extent, I think 20 touches is well within the range of outcomes. My concern is more so just along the Lions offense as a whole. It's just terrible, and it's tough to bet on. And to be able to get Antonio Gibson for 300 more and Eli Mitchell for 600 more, both. I mean, just better. There's better teams, better offenses. I mean, Antonio Gibson, we already talked about that, but just to touch on Elijah Mitchell. Now that Debo's out, I mean, Debo was making hay on the ground as like a running back, man.
Yeah,
And now he's gone. I mean, Eli
taking
Mitchell's
touches
picking up,
away.
and Elijah Mitchell is picking up some pass game work. Like, it's just tough for me to come up with an argument as to not. I mean, Elijah Mitchell has a workload of a player that should be priced for mid sevens at the very least. And then the offense, we know they have a propensity to run the ball. So it's just like Eli Mitchell is probably going to have the same amount of touches of Jamal Williams, if not more. And he's a bit more explosive on a better team. So, Elijah Mitchell is a pretty easy one. I think Jamal Williams normally would be a good play at 5,400, like earlier in the year. But like just considering the other running backs in the slate, it's just not a direction I'm going. Because I think he's like I don't want to say Jamal Williams is just another guy, but he's like a jag, but he's like a jag plus. Like he's decent, but like there's just he's not going to burst a 40-yard touchdown.
He's not getting he doesn't have the same upside as those two others because I think he's very limited in his touch count versus them. I mean, Eli Mitchell came into the game last week. There was reports that he wasn't even potentially going to start the game, and he had 32 touches. Like that's a crazy amount, and he's getting goal line work. The likelihood of touchdowns on these other guys, just because of game flow, the teams they're on is higher than Jamal Williams. And at the end of the day, like Jamal Williams can catch 6 passes, but if Eli Mitchell ran 2 touchdowns in, then he's way ahead.
It's just Eli Mitchell can easily burst off. It's like, looking at the upside, I feel a lot better about.
He's 400-yard games and limited.
Is Jamal Williams going to get a 100-yard game? Like, no, I mean, no, it's just not happening. So I'm pretty out on Jamal Williams, just considering the other backs in this area. Another back I want to, not similar price, a bit more expensive, but at least I want to touch on is Leonard Fournette. I mean, this dude's been a locked and loaded RB1. 7,300 is still a fine price. It sounds about right, but it's still a great price for him. We already talked about how he thinks the Bucs are absolutely going to roll. And I think, like, more importantly, just looking at Fournette, I mean, he's taken over the complete pass game role. Like, Gio's not even a thing right now. And the guy is seeing all the touches in the red zone. He's seeing all the pass game work. He, like, last week, Luke, he ran routes on 81% of Brady's dropbacks. And for a running back, that's insane, man. Like, that is a crazy number. That's like a CMC number for dropbacks. I mean, I don't expect that every week, but, like, he is a true workhorse running back in a world, in a time when a workhorse running back is quite rare. So at 7,300, I mean, it's like, for me, it's really tough for me to not play Brady or Fournette is basically what I'm getting to.
It's funny like that you say the workhorse running back, because I feel like we're deep enough into the season now that more of them exist in a weird way because of injuries. It's like in the beginning of the year, you're splitting time, and then now it's like, well, I mean, Jamal Williams is going to be the workhorse because we have Jamar Jefferson as his backup and, things like that. So I agree. Do you like Fournette more than Madison, though? Just because of the fact that the way the teams play, I think the likelihood against the Lions, like the game flow of that, it's a great spot for Madison too.
Yeah, no, I think Madison's in a great spot. I think we talked about before the show. He's like, to me, he's like 80% of Dalvin, and statistically, he's probably like 90%. Like he's been killing it when he gets that opportunity. Part of me just sees that it's tough for me to project ownership and for some of these running backs we talked about because they're all like probably all these dudes are going to see north of 20%. But I
let
guess
me ask you this: if Dalvin Cook was 300 more than Leonard Fournette in these spots,
I'd play Dalvin.
You'd play Dalvin, right? So I guess the question is, what if you double that? What if he was 600 more? What if Dalvin was 8K? If we're saying he's like 80% or whatever, if Dalvin was 8K, would you play him or Fournette in their given spots? Like I still think I would lean Dalvin in that.
Yeah, I think
just because of the idea that Brady could throw 3 touchdowns to Evans or Gronk or Godwin. Like there's so many other ways they could score that I think I'd still lean Madison.
Can't fault you. I think if you played both Madison and Fournette, I mean, there's just too many. I wish I could play 5 running backs this week. It's a tough one. Getting it right is going to be the difference between making money or not. So I think we don't sit here and talk about Madison really. I mean, I think he's a great play. I think I do. We started this off like talking about these running backs, talking about some of our favorite plays or likely going to be this, the more popular plays. But like with that, I believe there's going to be some leverage at the top with Jonathan Taylor at 92, Austin Eckler at 83, and Mixon at 81. Obviously great backs, priced, correctly as what they should be for the most part. But with that said, like I don't think, I think almost all those running backs we talked about are going to be higher, have more ownership than Jonathan Taylor and especially Eckler and Mixon. So thoughts on playing Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, and Joe Mixon this week?
I think they're all going to end up being great plays. What generally happens in these spots, I've noticed, is I would guess that Jonathan Taylor ends up being the most owned of those 3 because he's the highest priced.
Agreed. And he's a terror.
Yeah. I mean, he's 2 weeks off of a 5 touchdown game. He's facing the Texans. I think I'd end up liking Mixing the most of the 3 because I think he'll get less ownership, but I like his upside more than Eckler. Joe Mixon has 4 straight games with 2 touchdowns, and we saw last week like he can get 30 touches in any given game, and they're not afraid to just give him the ball and give him the ball by the goal line. They don't really care about throwing for touchdowns as much as some of these other teams might, but they've just been giving him the ball and feeding him all once they get leads.
Their identity is a run first team, man. It really is.
Yeah, but that's true, and at the same time, he is a running back that if the game flows that way, can catch balls. Like he has in 3 of those last 4 games. He has at least 4 catches as well. So he's getting you 30 plus touches the last 2 games. And we've seen this in the past with Joe Mixon. This part of the year seems to be when he gets ramped up in touch count. And their team fighting for playoffs, they're fighting for that first place in the division. They're going to do what they can to win. So it's a matchup that lines up perfectly for Joe Mixon. And I think after his big game last week, I was expecting him to come in a little owned, but I think because of pricing and other people in good spots, he might just get forgotten again.
Yeah, you're not wrong, man. Another thing I just want to bring up, Darrell Henderson, 6,100 in a great spot against the Jags, but he has a quad injury. He did not practice all week today. We recorded it on a Friday, and he did not practice as of Friday. A no practice on Friday is usually not a good sign for a football player, unless you're like some wily vet. But regardless, it's not a good thing. So Sony Michel, 4,300, could walk into a 20 to 25 touch role on the Rams. Like, they've been a little struggling as of late, but it is a good, I would say high-powered offense in totality. So, I mean, and they're playing the Jags, which is another great matchup. So, real quick, talk about your thoughts about if Henderson is out and Michel at 4,300, because I am at this point in time expecting Henderson to sit.
Yeah, I'd almost rather we learn that Henderson were to play this game and I wouldn't even have to think about Sonny Michel because 4,300 is just such a good price for a running back on a good team, and it's a late game, but also like against the Jaguars, it's a great matchup. So, I would say I would rather play Sony Michel than Jamal Williams. I think Sony Michel would then pull away the likelihood of me playing Gibson with um, Eli Mitchell. Like I think I'd have to choose one of the two, or I mean, you could play all three of those guys and go. But at the end of the day, I think I'd rather pay up one, pick a middle, and then Sonny Michel as the running backs. This seems like a 3 running back week, either way. But
Almost no
if
matter
Sonny
what.
Michel's there, it's hard to really avoid him in like a cash build. But I if I were to do that, then I'm playing Sony Michel and going up higher at my quarterback position. So that's probably where I'd be upgrading.
I
But
like that. Get into like a
the way
Brady from a car.
the way that I'm describing this week compared to others, there's no Travis Kelsey, there's no Tyreek Hill, there's no Devontae Adams. Like there's just Cooper Kupp at wide receiver, but there's not like an obvious high end running back and high end wide receiver that you're trying to jam in this week. I don't think that the Jonathan Taylor, Cooper Kupp are like super obvious, but if you're playing Sony Michel, you're not probably going to be playing Cooper Kupp in that lineup anyway. So to me, I don't really want to have that decision, but I think you don't have to play Sony Michel. Like he's not an immediate plug and play, but I think he does open up some nice parts of your lineup.
And we find out that information early enough, no doubt.
Yeah, because it's a late game too.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough.
Just
But
leave space open in salary.
any other running backs you want to talk about before we ask for the pool of 5?
Yeah, for my, I guess for my pool, I would probably say Mixon, Mitchell, Madison, Gibson, and then I guess we're gonna assume that Michelle's playing, so I'll say him. But I just want to get one thing out there. This is the week that Miles Sanders is going to go off because no one's going to play him, and the Jets are terrible against the run, and everyone saw what happened last week when they wanted to play him. This is the week he's going to break off a 60, 70-yard touchdown, and people are going to be like, oh my God, of course he went off this.
It's T. Higgins, I think, of what you said earlier. It's like the T. Higgins thing.
T. Higgins of last week is Miles Sanders of this week.
Shifting over to wide receiver. You mentioned it. Let's just talk like there's a clear distinction at the top here. I mean, it's basically you have two guys that are high priced. It's Cooper Kupp. It's Justin Jefferson. $9K for Kupp, $82 for Jefferson. Your thoughts on playing both or either or none?
I'm not really looking at the high end wide receivers too much, but I think I just prefer Cooper Kupp. Like he just, it doesn't matter the matchup. He's getting you 10 targets. And for the most part, he's getting you at least 7 catches for 90 yards in that matchup. Like he has 4 games this year where he ended within 8 yards of the 100-yard bonus.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he hasn't had a game in single digits yet. But his floor seems to be that 18.6. He had 7 catches for 96 yards last week, and that just like feels like his floor right now, which is weird to say, but yeah, like 18 points for floor. Like he's 9K. You can afford him, especially if you get like Sony Michel and some of these other cheap guys. Like there are ways to get up to Cooper Kupp this week. We'll talk about it at tight end as well, but he's probably my favorite. Justin Jefferson is like the alpha, but I could see that game just becoming where the Vikings were just going to run the ball because we're up 2 touchdowns already on the Lions. But I just think Jefferson, this isn't probably the week that I'd end up playing him.
Understandable.
Who's the other one? You said Keenan?
No, I didn't even get to Keenan. I mean, I'm just not playing Keenan. It's just the floor is like it's just the ceiling.
You exactly 15 points.
Yeah, I'm done. There. Yeah, let's talk about some of my with Debo out. I think Brandon Ayuk at 5,600 is one of those situations where I'm like, okay, like I'm back in on the Ayuk thing. It's been tough to roster Ayuk in season long, what have you. But like at the same time, things have been looking good. Things have turned around for Ayuk at this point in time. If you're looking at his like snaps and targets and all that other stuff, it's basically he's back to a full-time receiving role. And with Debo out, it frees up a lot in terms of wide receiver. Kittle's good. He's a good pass catcher, good tight end, but he blocks a lot. It is basically going to be the Brandon Ayuk show. So he has settled into a role that he had last year. He's back to the role that people expected him to have going into this year. He's back to the role that made him a high middle round pick. So at that price, at 5,600 against the Seahawks secondary, which has been absolutely terrible all year, he's one of those guys I'm like building around. He's one of those guys that he will definitely be in my cash lineup. Your thoughts on Ayuk at 56?
I really like the play. I think people are gonna want to play Mooney. They're gonna want to. I don't think they like forgot about Ayuk per se, but we haven't seen a big game out of Ayuk yet this year. People have been somewhat down on him, but the last 2 weeks he's really shown that. In my idea, like I think he's back to a pretty good role on a team that now without Debo, like he's gonna get even bigger role. It just seems like they want Kittle blocking, like he doesn't do as much as he's done in years past, and I think Ayuk is gonna sort of be the alpha there, and I expect the 49ers to have a pretty good game against Seattle this week as well.
A real quick, and a guy that I am a lock of mine, but I guess it's not necessarily a lock yet because we know if he's playing. Devontae Parker, 3,900, man. Still on IR, but it looks like he might come off of IR. The Dolphins, while the matchup might not be the toughest, they are in a situation where they cannot afford to lose any games with a rough start to their season if they want to lock in likely a wild card in this tougher division. So, I think getting Devontae Parker back, if they can get it back, like the news that I've read is that he has a shot to play. And if he does, and if he's active at 3,900, he's a lock for me. I mean, he's seen 7 targets in every single game he's played this season. He's a good wide receiver when he's healthy. So at 3,900, you're telling me a wide receiver is going to see 6-7 targets at 3,900, like against the Giants of all teams, like absolutely lock me in. So probably, obviously it's another sit and wait, kind of like the Michelle situation, but Devontae Parker 39 seems awfully good to me.
Yeah. If he plays, like you brought it up to me and I didn't really think of it right away, but, he's just been like injured all year, so you don't think about it. But yeah, if you look at his game logs, like whenever he's been in there, I still the issue I have with it right now is has Waddle just become the guy that Tua wants to
That's
throw?
but like or is he been forced to become
is he
been forced to become the guy because Fuller and Devontae Parker have been out all season?
I think Parker hurts Gesicki a lot more than Waddle because they're going to be different players. Like whenever Parker's in there, he's more of like a touchdown target anyway. So I think Waddle will still be able to get his like 8 catches and stuff like that, but you're paying 2,500 more for Waddle. So Parker at 3,900 is just such an insane value if he's back, if they activate him and he's back to play this game against the Giants defense. Like, yeah, I'm ready to play that. Like his floor isn't terrible, and he's the type of guy that can come in that game with 2 touchdowns, even if he only has 3-4 catches. So I like Parker.
And then I got so Fournette, who was in my pool but not in your pool. Seems like you're not playing him. I got to think you got to have some interest in Godwin at 66 and Evans at 67. It is a pretty cheap price and a great matchup in a game we've already talked about that we like Brady in. Thoughts on Godwin and Evans?
I hate that they're priced 100 against each other.
They did that
in general. They usually have bigger spread, and I could just pick the one that's cheaper. I think I prefer Godwin at this point in time. Evans he hasn't really had too many upside games that we've seen in the past. Since that game that he had 3 touchdowns, he's been somewhat lacking from a fantasy standpoint. Mm-hmm. We haven't seen him have over 75 yards since then, but Godwin seemed to sort of catch a wave midway through the season, and he's getting at least 5 targets a game, but we've seen that spike up to 11, 12 targets at times as well. So the issue I have is I'm not sure if the Falcons are going to have any sort of fight in this game. So if Brady stacks are going to be very common in this game, I might just avoid it in general. But
Okay.
though it's hard in that range, they're probably my favorite plays because I'd rather play 6,600 for Godwin than 6,400 for Waddle. But I wanted to ask you about who's 6,200. DeAndre Hopkins is 6,200.
And he might be active.
If he's going to be active, that is a very good matchup against the Bears defense. I think people somewhat forget about playing. It's been 4 weeks now. Kyler Hopkins stacks that could be kind of sneaky this week. But the other guy in that range, like I'd probably just play Deontay Johnson over Evans or Godwin, unless I'm playing a Brady team. But I mean, Deontay Johnson has 3 straight games of at least 13
Deontay
targets.
Johnson is a great DK play every week. I mean, 68.
He's going to get you seven catches for 80 yards is like his floor right now, which is like kind of crazy to say, but he's got
and only 4 TDs on the year, man. So I mean, it's happening.
Yeah, he hasn't been getting the touchdowns, but he has 7 games this year with at least 12 targets.
You love to see that.
So it's a greater than 50% chance that he's going to get 12 targets. So, I mean, Ben hasn't been great and hasn't landed 10 of those in a game yet. But hey, one of these weeks it's probably going to come. And a game against Baltimore, like the division rivalry, it could happen this week. But I'd probably prefer Deontay over Evans and potentially even Godwin as well.
I think like we talk about playing like offenses we think are going to do well, right?
Yeah.
And playing like the running back or the wide receivers. And I look at, and we talk about Jonathan Taylor, 9,200. Like if I don't play Jonathan Taylor, I have a lot of interest in Pittman at 5,700. Pretty hot name lately in the fantasy circles. Things have cooled off lately. He's had a couple down games. But at 5,700 in a really good matchup against the Texans, I mean, if you're not going to go with JT, I mean, Pittman at 5,700, if you're hedging saying, hey, JT's not going to explode, that's got to lead you to at least maybe Pittman getting some love there. I mean, there's not a lot of other weapons unless we're going to roll with our T.Y. Are we still rolling with our T.Y. Hilton at Houston Texans narrative? Is that dead or is that dead?
Maybe. I mean, it's not terrible.
Anyways, but I like Pittman at 5,700. It's more so just the price in this one and how good he's been playing. Again, things have been a bit slow, but an eruption game in a good spot, especially if you're not looking at JT, is something that I think I have some interest in at the very least.
Yeah,
I would play Pittman over Mooney. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, so we're playing Ayuk and Pittman instead of Mooney this week.
Yeah, I
mean,
would say
it's not bad at all.
Any other wide receivers you'd like to talk about before we ask for your pool and move to the tight ends?
The other one that we didn't talk about that I kind of like is Rashad Bateman at 4,900. It's a game against the Steelers, haven't been that great of a defense. He's getting a lot of action. The problem with the Ravens offense is they just haven't been scoring a lot of points recently, but we've seen that he's got big playability. He's getting a good amount of targets, like he's active and he's under 5K. So I think for the price, like I might throw a couple darts at him. But yeah, like a Bateman and Deontay Johnson mini stack, I kind of like. It's relatively cheap, but besides that, everyone else I'm pretty sure we talked about.
Pool of 5 wide receivers, Lou.
Yeah, I'll go with Kupp, Deontay, Ayuk, Parker, and I'll say Godwin.
All right.
You know who's still under 6K?
Who
finally had a good week? T. Higgins, 5,800.
Sorry, you're going to get 13
we
points
didn't really
again this
talk
week.
about Hunter Renfrow, actually.
I think it's a fade for me, man. I think everyone's going to be on him, and I think it's a bit of a
too
fade.
many people. He's going to be over-owned for like his 8 catches for 80 yards that he ends up with.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I guess it's just I'm looking other directions with a little more upside.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw the big game, but like I think that's more of an exception, not the norm here. So That's my thoughts on Renfrow. I mean, it's like, oh, like Renfrow, like 100, like 24 DK points, but it's like he could easily get you 12 to 16, which he has. It's good. He 3Xs, but I mean, I don't know. Just my wide receiver positions, I'm looking for a little bit more upside this week. So looking off of Renfrow. Tight ends, I mean, got to sit here and talk about our man Foster Moreau's 27 ultimate punt. I mean, this dude's probably going to see over 40% ownership. I mean, I would not be surprised. He's been good when
Especially
Waller's out.
Small field stuff.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, it's like he even has some decent games with Waller on the field. I mean, just one. But either way, like when Waller was out, 18 DK points. I mean, he doesn't need a lot to hit that value, or at least 3X at 27. So, are you eating the chalk on Foster Moreau?
Yeah. At least in the right tournament. I think the times that I wouldn't be playing Moreau is if I'm matching the quarterback with my tight end, and in lineups that I would have like Sony Michel. Maybe that's the move this week, is if Sony Michel is there, you play either him or Moreau, because everyone's going to have kind of similar lineup construction if you play both. So maybe that's the move this week, is if Sony Michel hops up, or like if everyone's just going to go Michel, Parker, Moreau, and those are 3 spots. It's just so much easier when you know everyone wants to do that, to play other things. So we kind of talked about it before, but like James O'Shaughnessy is 2,600, but I don't think I would do that. I think I'd rather go up.
So if Moreau wasn't, like, if Waller was playing, I would talk about O'Shaughnessy. I really would, because the Jags are targeting the tight end. So I would, but it's just not worth it right there. Another tight end that I really like to kind of get off of Foster Moreau is Logan Thomas. 4K, 6 targets, 3 catches, 31 yards last week. Wasn't great, but a touchdown callback that honestly should have been a touchdown. So, and I've talked about my love with RSJ for the most part. He paid off more than he didn't this year. There's just not a lot of options, especially with McKissick out. I mean, I think that, like, you look at the pass catching options, it's like Terry McLaurin and a hobbled Curtis Samuel and Logan Thomas, like maybe Antonio Gibson to a point, but like Logan Thomas could walk away from this game with leading the second most targets and probably third at worst, in a game that is being talked about as a shootout. So, I think this is a good way to kind of be a little bit different than the field, and put in Logan Thomas at 4K is something that I have some serious interest in.
Yeah, I think these are pretty good options. We've seen it in the past where Logan Thomas can have like just 10 targets, play every snap. Even when he was out, you see his backup tight ends are getting every snap. So it just seems like that's what Washington wants to do on offense. And this is a game that we keep talking about as being something that people are going to want to attack. And this is a way of still having exposure to that game that you maybe still think is going to score 50 points. But you're not taking like the super chalky, obvious tight end. You're going with the one on the other side of the game. So I really like the Logan Thomas call. I think a lot of those 4 to 4,500 tight ends are pretty solid. Like Freiermuth is in another great spot, gets so many touchdowns. He's becoming one of Ben's favorite target by the end zone. But the Ravens are one of the worst teams in the league against tight ends. They generally are better against wide receivers, and they give up more fantasy points to tight ends. And so I kind of like Freiermuth again this week, and then Goddard. Like a lot of people played Goddard. We're pretty high on Goddard last week, and he failed for them. So another great matchup against the Jets. Sort of depends on what Jalen Hurts comes out in this game, and I don't really hate playing Goddard either. So those are probably the 3 tight ends I'm going to look at most, if not playing for Moreau.
Any other tight ends? I mean, for me, it's like going to be Logan Thomas or Foster Moreau. Don't really see myself paying up at anything, but is anyone else worth noticing? I mean, maybe Gronk. We talk about the Brady stacks, but I think that to me, that's really about it.
Yeah, I think Gronk is obviously like a good spot. He's a good play. Kyle Pitts, it's tough. Like, I just don't really want to touch the Falcons' offense
I don't
at
either.
all.
At all.
So probably
Like
won't go
if they
Pitts.
didn't score a touchdown, would it surprise you?
Yeah, I'm expecting it to be like 28-3 kind of game.
Yeah, exactly.
31-3, maybe.
All right, pool of 3 tight ends, Lou.
I'll do Moreau, Freiermuth, and Thomas.
All right, let's close it out here with defense. Again, kind of just what fits. We're not really sitting here like you need to play any certain defense over another. But defenses that we like, I think like the obvious one, if you can fit it, is going to be Dolphins versus Mike Lennon. I mean, I think Vegas has them in their implied total. The Giants implied total at 16 points, which is quite pathetic. So I think you can get to the Dolphins at 33, not 3K, 33. That's something I'd be interested in. But again, that's it's sometimes tough to find that kind of money. Thoughts on the Dolphins or other defenses?
Dolphins are probably my favorite play if you can get to them, but they're also going to be the most owned. So with that ownership, like I don't think people are going to play too much of the Vikings right next to them, who are playing against the Lions. So they're probably decent. I kind of like the Bears if Murray misses again and they're facing Colt McCoy. Bears for 2,600. There's not a lot to like under 3K, but I mean, if you can stomach playing the Jets into Jalen Hurts, like that could be okay. But one thing we talked about earlier was I think Washington defense is a pretty decent play this week with the idea that so many people want to play the Raiders offense.
Yes.
So you're just further leveraging the fact that the Raiders offense fails by saying the Washington defense succeeds. So I'd probably try to get the Washington defense if I'm going on the cheaper end for that reason.
Especially with Gibson.
Yeah. And then Bears, I'd look at if Kyler were to miss again.
All right. Final thoughts. Week 13, DFS, DraftKings, Lou.
Try to figure out 3 running backs that you want to play in your team because there's 20 different ones that you could probably play. But yeah, I think pay attention to the Henderson news, and I don't think of the running backs that we talked about, like Gibson plays in the late game, Eli Mitchell plays in the late game. So there is going to be a decent amount of flexibility, I think, in late swap. So I don't think it's a huge deal to have to be concerned about if Henderson's going to play because there's a lot of other cheap options that you can go to. So just keep enough salary left that you'll be able to pivot. All
right. That'll do it for us. Lou, where can I find you on Twitter? Where can I find your work?
Yeah, at Lee Sherman. Work for Lucky Trader with NFT stuff as well. But yeah, reach out to me on Twitter.
If you're listening to this right now and you think NFTs are dumb, that's fine. But if you're interested in NFTs or don't know what they are or are interested in learning anything, let Lou know. Check out Lucky Trader. That is what Lou is doing for his job. They pay him to do stuff around NFTs, which is nuts, but you love to see it. You can find me on Twitter at FFTyler. That's all we have today, folks. Don't forget, tell somebody you love them. Later.